everyone, to Writing Changes Lives. My name is Judy Howard, and I'm an author, mentor, and some people call me a firecracker. I want to welcome all you listeners to my very first podcast. I am so glad you are here. Today we are going to meet Pamela Applegate, author of Jumping for Joy, and her partner, Sedonist artist John Sandoval. Pam and John are living examples of how writing really changes lives. I know after you hear their stories, you are going to be inspired and you're going to love them like I do. Pamela and John, welcome to my very first Writing Changes Lives.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Oh, well, welcome. This podcast is about how writing changes lives. And even though 15 years ago I had never even thought about writing a book, because 80% of the population has thought about writing a book, but I was never one of them. And the number one question everyone asks me is, how did you get started? I'll bet people are asking you that now, Pamela, aren't they?
Yes, I never dreamed I would write a book. Circumstances, life, and meeting you spurred me on to write my story and tell about what happened in my life.
Well, I have to confess, when I was writing the content for this podcast, I realized that as I was preparing this interview, until I met you and John, I had no awareness of how writing changes lives. It was changing my life, but I just wasn't aware of it. And I had just settled in Brookings and was traveling full-time in my motorhome and started the River Writers Critique Group because I wanted help with writing my own personal book. It was kind of a selfish reason for starting the critique group. And if you want to know more about mine, check out my other episodes that are upcoming. I'll be talking more about how I really got started. But I'm here now with Pamela and John, and because each of them have an incredible story that will answer your questions on how does anyone achieve a dream that either they think is impossible or one that they haven't even dared to dream. And like I say, Pamela, when you joined my critique group, and you were started to write your story, Jumping for Joy, about your daughter, I watched you change right before my eyes. And of course, in the process, it changes me too. So I'm passionate about writing and people telling their stories. So I'm glad you're here. And why don't you tell our listeners, Pamela, a little bit about where you were in your life when we met and how we met? Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I had moved to Oregon. I had lived there previously and left for a while. And during the time I wasn't living in Oregon, my daughter passed away. And I was living in Southern California. And so I wound up returning to Oregon. And I was going to the farmer's market, and there you sat with your little car and your information booth. And I always liked to read, so I was perusing your array of books, and I saw a book there. It said,
The Grieving Gift. Yeah, that's the one you were attracted to, I remember.
Yeah. And I said, how can grief be a gift? I mean, it was 2 years after my daughter had died, and I was in a terrible state of grief. And I said, I don't understand this. Tell me about this book. And so I began to share with you about my daughter and that she had passed away.
Yes.
And you said to me, I've never gifted a book to anyone, but I'm going to gift this book to you. And you signed it, autographed it, and wrote it to me and told me that you hoped it helped me on my journey through grief. It so struck me. I instantly felt like we had a connection.
Well, I remember that day so well because like say, I had never given a book away, but you had shared. I guess you had just told me that your daughter had died, but we went for coffee after that. You came back and you wanted to be my friend, and I kind of laughed and thought, well, yeah, I'll be your friend. You felt connected to me. A lot of my readers do, but I didn't take it that seriously. But we have just become the best of friends, and I really got to know you in the critique group. But there was so much more to your life than, not that losing a daughter is minor, but we went to coffee. You and John and I went to coffee, and I remember we were sitting in the coffee shop, and you were telling me about your daughter who had passed away, and it had been how long ago?
About 2 years.
About 2 years ago. But then you had met up with a high school boyfriend, and believe me, I'd had a meetup with my old high school boyfriend, so I knew what that was like. And you were talking about how wonderful it was, and how you guys had a boat in the harbor, and we're headed to Brookings. It was just a wonderful relationship, and you were headed to Brookings on Valentine's Day to meet up and have a nice weekend. And his kids called you and said he had just died on the boat. And then when we met, I believe it was only 4 months before we met, that your very best friend had committed suicide. And I'm sitting here, and you're telling me this, and I'm going, and I'm in awe, because although I've met a lot of people that have had one person pass away, and they're so consumed with grief that they're just a little bundle of tears, and yet you were smiling and you were joking and things. But the one thing you did do is you were talking about your daughter all the time. And I looked at John, your partner, and he sat there and listened. And I knew what it was like when my husband had passed away, and that's all I did was talk about our relationship. And I thought, he must really love you, because he allows you to talk about her and your best friend. So anyway, I knew you were special, and I'm just so impressed with you since I've met you. And so you joined my critique group. You had been wanting to finish. You'd started a story, Jumping for Joy. Tell us a little bit about the book and what you wanted to do with writing this book. Why did you want to write it?
After she passed away, I was so grief-stricken, I can't even describe that feeling. And I was starting to counseling, and the counselor said, why don't you keep a journal? It will be very helpful. So I started journaling every day. And for the first year, I wrote whatever popped into my mind that day when I sat down to journal, and I never missed a day. And some days it was very bleak and sad, and I would tell her, I don't know how I'm going to live without you. You've been this huge part of my life. This child was disabled, and so she was a 24/7 person that you took care of. And she called, even when she moved into her own apartment, she would call me multiple times a day. So I was very, very connected with her. And once she was gone, it was like there was nothing there. I just didn't know how to deal with this hole in my heart. And as I journeyed through this, at the end of the year, and I had stayed in counseling most of that year, at the end of the year, I started looking at what I had written on day one and what I had written at the end. And how, as we journeyed through the journal, I started sharing, remember when we did this? Remember when we went there? Remember how much fun we had when you were a Make-A-Wish child? I mean, it just got happier and happier as the journey went on. And so from those very first bleak days of desperation to the end of the year where I was celebrating her life. And then I think someone, I don't remember who I met, if it was the counselor or someone said, oh, you need to write a book. So that's kind of where, and when I met you, I think I told you, oh, I'm writing a book about my daughter. I wasn't really writing a book. I was just writing about my daughter.
Well, when you came to my writing critique group and started writing your story, I can remember the first chapter almost, it seems like word by word. And you haven't told the listeners or revealed to the listeners that Patricia, your daughter, you adopted, and she was how old when you adopted her?
Well, I met her when she was about 8 months old.
Okay, 8 months old. And I remember the first chapter, when you were writing it, you were telling me how you brought her home, and she was 8 months old. She had come from a drug-infested family, and
Yes.
and she had was it cerebral palsy that she had?
Yes.
And
She was born prematurely at 26 weeks old, which at that time, that
critical.
era, they didn't usually survive. She was a 1 pound, 7 ounce premature baby that had been exposed to crack cocaine.
Yes.
The day that she was born.
So for the listeners, when in that first chapter, Pamela is talking about how this baby who is 8 months old and coming from a drug-infested family would not even have contact with Pamela and her husband because
she wouldn't give eye contact to anyone. She would avert her gaze away from you.
And she also never cried, too.
No, she did not cry. I guess her early time in the home, she would cry, and they wouldn't pick her up, and they wouldn't feed her, and they wouldn't meet her needs. So she learned just to shut down.
Yeah.
And she only weighed 8 pounds at 8 months old.
Yes. I guess what I'm trying to get across to the listeners is that, Pamela, you had 6 children of your own when you brought this baby into your life, and you knew she would never walk, would never be able to sit up, and you decided to adopt her and take her in. And I want you to know that I don't know very many people who would take on such a responsibility. And not only did you take on the responsibility, but this little girl consumed your life. And I so understand why you wanted to write the book now, as I sat with you as you wrote your book, because she was such a delightful little girl. And
she was. She was such an addition to our family. And my other children were all older. My daughter was in college when we adopted her. And she just filled up our home with love and joy and purpose. Our whole purpose became to improve her life. And I honestly, in the early days, thought nurture versus nature. If we love her and nurture her, she's going to continue to improve. And she's going to continue to make those naysayers in the medical field find out that love conquers all. And that's what I thought.
And doesn't it? So.
Yes, it does.
I mean, like I say, I want to get across to the listeners of how it's, and this writing and the writing was, out of love, and so it just opens up so many avenues when we tell our stories, and
week after week, Judy, I brought very painful personal information about us taking her into our lives and how it affected everyone. And there was a lot of times I remember reading to you in the group and I would cry because it was so moving to me to relive those early moments. And yet I didn't realize that it was the process of healing as well. As I shared my heart and my pain with our group, and you guys critiqued the writing, but you also accepted my story.
Yes.
And
I
started to change me.
Okay. Yeah. I that's what I like what you're sharing is because I talked to someone who said, you have to get on with things when you're grieving. And the writer was saying, no, we don't get on with it. We go through the grief. And I think that's what happened to you and what happens to people when they write their stories.
Well, and I think as you write it for the book or the content, you're also re-examining yourself and what you've experienced and how it felt and where you are now. And as I just went through those weeks with you, I mean, it was weeks and weeks and weeks of every week writing 5 pages, getting them critiqued, correcting them, coming back with 5 more pages.
I know.
Sometimes I was writing 20 hours a week at home to keep up with the schedule. And yet I found myself as I did this, I would laugh at the funny things she did, and I would cry at the hard things that I never really expressed.
Yeah.
Because people would say, oh, you're so wonderful for adopting this little girl. No, this little girl was so wonderful that she blessed our whole family. It wasn't just me. It wasn't my husband or our other children. She changed everyone's lives, even the grandchildren's lives, as they were born and came into our family.
Well, I know I watched you change, and it changed me. And tell us about when you finally finished your book and what happened when you published it.
So I got to the end of the book. I was very anxious to get it published. And so I needed a cover for the book. And my partner, John, is a wonderful artist. And I had seen this image on the internet.
I called John back, by the way, I called John back then a closet artist.
Yes, he was very much a closet artist. And so I saw this picture and I said, John, I want you to draw this picture for the cover of my book. But instead of a little boy standing on the seat of his wheelchair and he had his arms extended towards heaven, because his dad had built this for a monument on his grave, I said, I want you to draw this, but I want Patricia to be standing on the edge of the wheelchair like she's free from it. And I want the chair to look solid, and I want her to look ethereal, like she's not in that body anymore. Well, John agonized over my wishes.
Yes.
And
well, here, let me just, because John was an artist. And when I met him, like I said, I remember meeting him, and he was so quiet. Compared to you, he's just such a quiet, kind man. And I loved him because I could tell he loved you. But you told me how he would sit in the, at night after you went to bed, he would sketch, and and every once in a while you'd show me one when he wasn't around. And his pictures were awesome then. And this was, going on 3 years ago? And so, but you told me how he would just, if you walked into the room when he was sketching, he would cover it up and he didn't even want you to see it. Am I right?
Yes, and he would never let me post any of his artwork on Facebook or show any of my friends. He didn't want any acknowledgement of what he could do. And it came down to the book was all finished, edited, ready to go. It was like the day before I was going to publish it on Amazon. And I said, John, I need that artwork. You have to give me the artwork. And finally, he sent me the picture, which was exactly what, and I'll let him tell you.
Yes, yeah, we'll get to you, John, in a minute and finish that story, because I just knew during that time how badly you wanted him to do the artwork, and I knew how scared he was of anybody seeing his artwork. I just said, how is she going to get him to have his art on the cover of a book? Yeah. So, but anyway,
and everyone would see it.
Yes, and so anyway, back to your story. So you just you've got the cover. He's done the cover, and you're ready to publish. Tell me about the listeners about what happened.
So that day we were traveling in a Class C RV, and we were parked in my son's driveway, linked onto his internet. And I said to John, "Okay, here we are. We're gonna push the button." And I said, "I want you to put your finger on my finger, and we're going to push the button on the computer and send this book up to Amazon." And just then, a very dear friend of mine of over 60 years called, and she had written the foreword in the book. And I said, "Oh, you're just in time. Imagine your finger with ours. We're going to publish this book right now." And oddly enough, I mean, I was relieved that it was done, but all of a sudden, all this heaviness, this grief that had been riding around on my shoulders since she had passed away, lifted off of me, and I felt such a relief, such happiness, such a joy, that I realized that by publishing this story about her, she would live forever. I wasn't going to live forever. My kids won't live forever, but she will live forever in this book. And someday, 50 years from now, someone will pick up that book in a secondhand store and read the story of this marvelous little girl that overcame such insurmountable issues, physically, mentally, in every way. And so it was a relief to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell everybody when I tell your story, it says she pushed the button and it was whoosh, the grief just left you. So now let's go. A beautiful story. That's one of the reasons I wanted you to be on my podcast, because that's what we're talking about. Life changes when you write your book and tell your stories. So John, are you there?
John, yeah, a minute.
John is this man who is was afraid to let even Pamela see his artwork. Because now he's going to tell the story, but his art now is in the Sedona galleries in Sedona, and he sits there in the galleries and he does his artwork for everybody to see and ask him questions. He is out of the closet. So John, tell us a little bit about making that book cover and how it changed your life.
Well, hello, Judy.
Hello.
I was so nervous. I thought, I can't do this. I cannot do this. And that last day, I had to do it. And so I did it. And still, when after I was done, I went, I don't know. She loved it. Pam loved it. I said, okay.
Everybody loved it. It's a beautiful cover.
It was a nervous thing for me to do because I'm a very quiet, shy person. And I guess from that point on, I start to do art and here and there, but not to show anybody, basically.
Right.
It was just, I guess, a hobby. And then little by little, I did a pet for at the
pet portrait.
RV, a portrait at the RV park that we lived at. And when I gave it to them, the wife started to cry. And, that's touching. For me, that means so much to me.
Of course.
And that's where it started, basically. And so I kept on doing art. Not all the time, but I would do it. And then we moved to Arizona. And I did some art here and there, but I still would not let Pam, show it on Facebook.
Well, Pamela is your biggest cheerleader, by the way. And I know she was pushing you and pushing you and pushing, say, this is beautiful, John. You should let people see it. I mean, I told you that too. So go on. So you get to Arizona, and which is where you're living is Cottonwood, which is only 30 miles from Sedona. And that's a art culture there.
It is. It's a very art culture. So one day I was doing watercolors, acrylics, painting, and then one day I saw this on YouTube, scratchboard, and I was very interested by it. I says, I think I want to try that. And I fell in love with it. I love doing the scratchboard. I don't know what it is about it, but there's no color in it. You can put color, but I prefer black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me explain what scratchboard is. That way people will.
Well, that's okay. Tell them where your art is. Do you have a website or where people can contact you and see your art?
I haven't done a website. I did pass out my business card of my email, and if they want to contact me, they can contact me.
Well, great. I'm telling you, I love both of your stories, and you, to me, are an inspiration not only to the art world and the writing world, but to everyone who's wanting to do something that they think is impossible. So
Right.
I just want to thank you for coming. I love you guys. You're an inspiration to everyone who hears your story. And thank you so much for this interview. And I hope to have you on the program again one of these days soon.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.